The sun that had shone so brightly on Belpher Castle at noon, when Maud and Reggie Byng set out on their journey, shone on the West End of London with equal pleasantness at 2 o'clock. In Little Gooch Street all the children of all the small shopkeepers who support life in that backwater by selling each other vegetables and singing canaries were out and about playing curious games of their own invention. Cats washed themselves on doorsteps preparatory to looking in for lunch at one of the numerous garbage cans which dotted the sidewalk. Waiters peered austerely from the windows of the 2 Italian restaurants which carry on the Lucrezia Borgia tradition by means of 1 shilling and 6 table d'hôte luncheons. The proprietor of the grocery store in the corner was bidding a silent farewell to a tomato which even he, though a dauntless optimist, had been compelled to recognize as having outlived its utility. On all these things the sun shone with a genial smile. Around the corner, in Shaftesbury Avenue, an east wind was...
To listen to the complete audiobook for free, check Amazon Audible. Link can be found in the description or the first comment.
Pierced the hardened sides of the citizenry, but it did not penetrate into Little Gooch Street, which, facing south and being narrow and sheltered, was enabled practically to bask. Mac, the stout guardian of the stage door of the Regal Theatre, whose gilded front entrance is on the avenue, emerged from the little glass case in which the management kept him, and came out to observe life and its phenomena with an indulgent eye. Mac was feeling happy this morning. His job was a permanent one, not influenced by the success or failure of the productions which followed one another at the theatre throughout the year, but he felt nevertheless a sort of proprietary interest in these ventures, and was pleased when they secured the approval of the public. Last night's opening, a musical piece by an American author and composer, had undoubtedly made a big hit, and Mac was glad because he liked what he had seen of the company, and, in the brief time in which he had known him, had come to entertain a warm regard for George Bevan, the composer, who had travelled over from New York to help with the London production. George Bevan turned the corner now, walking slowly, and it seemed to Mac gloomily, towards the stage door. He was a young man of about 27, tall and well knit, with an agreeable, clean-cut face, of which a pair of good and honest eyes were the most noticeable feature. His sensitive mouth was drawn down a little at the corners, and he looked tired. "Morning, Mac." "Good morning, sir." "Anything for me?" "Yes, sir, some telegrams. I'll get 'em." "Oh, I'll get 'em," said Mac, as if reassuring some doubting friend and supporter as to his ability to carry through a labour of Hercules. He disappeared into his glass case. George Bevan remained outside in the street, surveying the frisking children with a sombre glance. They seemed to him very noisy, very dirty, and very young. Disgustingly young. Theirs was joyous, exuberant youth which made a fellow feel at least 60. Something was wrong with George today, for normally he was fond of children. Indeed, normally he was fond of most things. He was a good-natured and cheerful young man, who liked life and the great majority of those who lived it contemporaneously with himself. He had no enemies and many friends. But today he had noticed from the moment he had got out of bed that something was amiss with the world. Either he was in the grip of some divine discontent due to the highly developed condition of his soul, or else he had a grouch. One of the two. Or it might have been the reaction from the emotions of the previous night. On the morning after an opening, your sensitive artist is always apt to feel as if he had been dried over a barrel. Besides, last night there had been a supper party after the performance at the flat which the comedian of the troupe had rented in Jermyn Street. A forced, rowdy supper party, where a number of tired people with overstrained nerves had seemed to feel it a duty to be artificially vivacious. It had lasted till 4 o'clock, when the morning papers with the notices arrived, and George had not got to bed till 4:30. These things coloured the mental outlook. Mac reappeared. "Here you are, sir." "Thanks." George put the telegrams in his pocket. A cat, on its way back from lunch, paused beside him in order to use his leg as a serviette. George tickled it under the ear abstractly. He was always courteous to cats, but today he went through the movements perfunctorily and without enthusiasm. The cat moved on. Mac became conversational. "They tell me the piece was a hit last night, sir." "It seemed to go very well." "My missus saw it from the gallery, and all the first-nighters were speaking very highly of it. There's a regular clip, you know, sir, over here in London that goes to all the first nights in the gallery. Highly critical they're always. Especially if it's an American piece like this one. They don't like it, they precious well tell you so. My missus says they was all speaking very highly of it. My missus says she ain't seen a livelier show for a long time, and she's a great theatre goer. My missus says they was all especially pleased with the music." "Well, that's good." "The Morning Leader give it a fine write-up. How was the rest of the papers?" "Splendid. All of them. I haven't seen the evening papers yet. I came out to get them." Mac looked down the street. "There'll be a rehearsal this afternoon, I suppose, sir? Here's Miss Dore coming along." George followed his glance. A tall girl in a tailor-made suit of blue was coming towards them. Even at a distance one caught the genial personality of the new arrival. It seemed to go before her like a heartening breeze. She picked her way carefully through the children crawling on the sidewalk. She stopped for a moment and said something to one of them. The child grinned. Even the proprietor of the grocery store appeared to brighten up at the sight of her, as at the sight of some old friend. "How's business, Bill?" she called to him as she passed the spot where he stood brooding on the mortality of tomatoes. And though he replied "rotten," a faint, grim smile did nevertheless flicker across his tragic mask. Billy Dore, who was one of the chorus of George Bevan's musical comedy, had an attractive face, a mouth that laughed readily, rather bright golden hair, which she was fond of insisting with perfect truth was genuine though appearances were against it, and steady blue eyes. The latter was frequently employed by her in quelling admirers who were encouraged by the former to become too ardent. Billy's views on the opposite sex who forgot themselves were as rigid as those of Lord Marshmoreton concerning thrips. She liked men.
To listen to the complete audiobook for free, check Amazon Audible. Link can be found in the description or the first comment.